I wasn't supposed to be driving at night. The locals had warned me, "Don't travel after dark in these parts," they said, but I didn't listen. I was too eager to make it to my destination, too overconfident in my rental car and GPS. The winding country road I had been on for hours seemed endless, the headlights only managing to pierce through a narrow tunnel of darkness. The forest flanked both sides of the road, its tall trees casting ominous shadows that made me feel like I was being watched. And then, of course, my car broke down. A thick fog had rolled in, blurring everything ahead of me. The engine sputtered, groaned, and then stopped completely. My heart sank as the silence closed in around me. I was in the middle of nowhere, far from any highway, with no cell service. Panic started to creep in. That's when I noticed the lights. Just beyond the trees, faint and flickering, like lanterns swaying in the breeze. A village. I grabbed my flashlight, pulled on my jacket, and stepped out into the cold night. I figured I could walk to the village, find someone to help me with the car, or at least let me use a phone. The fog was thicker now, wrapping around me like a cold, wet blanket. Every step felt heavy, like the ground was pulling me in. As I trudged forward, the village came into view. It looked old, almost too old. The wooden houses were weathered and decrepit, the paint peeling off in chunks. A cold breeze swept through the empty streets, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and rot. Something about the place felt wrong, but I pushed the thought aside. I needed help. I entered the village. The village was eerily quiet. No sounds of life, no chatter, no barking dogs, not even the rustling of leaves. Just silence. The only noise was the crunch of gravel beneath my boots as I made my way down the main street. I approached what looked like a tavern, its sign barely hanging on by a rusty chain. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Still no answer. Frustrated, I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, and I was greeted by a cold gust of air from inside. The tavern was empty. Dust covered the bar, the tables, the stools. It looked like no one had been there for years. Yet, something felt off. I glanced at the tables and noticed the remnants of meals, plates with half-eaten food, cups filled with murky liquid. It was as if the villagers had vanished mid-meal. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the tavern. Only silence answered. I stepped further in, feeling a chill crawl down my spine. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of decay. Something creaked behind me. I turned, but nothing was there. Suddenly, the floorboards beneath my feet began to creak loudly, like someone was walking toward me. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The creaking stopped, but I could feel it, something was there. Watching me. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted out of the tavern, slamming the door behind me. I needed to leave. Now. I hurried down the village's main street, desperate to find someone, anyone. My breath was ragged, my hands trembling as I clutched my flashlight. The fog was getting thicker, the village growing darker, more oppressive. As I passed by the houses, I noticed something strange. The windows were all dark, but I could feel eyes on me, eyes peering out from behind the curtains, following my every move. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. But the shadows seemed to shift, to move closer. And then I heard it, a low, guttural whisper, like the sound of someone choking. It came from the alleyway to my right. Against my better judgment, I turned the beam of my flashlight toward the noise. A figure stood there, hunched over in the fog. Its body was twisted and contorted, its limbs unnaturally long. Pale skin clung to its bones like wet paper. And its eyes were hollow, black pits. I stumbled back in horror as the figure began to lurch toward me, dragging its feet through the dirt. Its mouth opened wide, wider than any human mouth should, revealing rows of jagged, rotten teeth. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from its throat. I ran. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to give out. But no matter how fast I ran, the thing was always behind me, its growls growing louder, its footsteps heavier. I finally stumbled into what looked like a small church. Its old wooden door was barely hanging on its hinges, but I didn't care. I threw myself inside and slammed the door shut. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. What was that thing? And why was this village so wrong? I collapsed onto one of the pews, trying to catch my breath. The church was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of mildew. My flashlight flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the stone walls. That's when I saw them. Sitting in the pews were people, dozens of them. They were still, unnaturally still, their faces pale and expressionless. They were all staring straight ahead, their eyes glazed over, as if they were in some kind of trance. I wanted to speak, to ask them what was happening, but my voice was caught in my throat. One by one, they turned to look at me. Their eyes were empty, hollow, like the figure in the alleyway. And then they began to stand, slowly, their heads twitching unnaturally to the side as if their necks were broken. I backed away, my hands shaking. They were getting closer, their lifeless eyes locked onto me. I turned and ran for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. I was trapped. The villagers were closing in, their mouths hanging open in silent screams, their bodies jerking with unnatural movements. I grabbed a candelabra from the altar and swung it wildly, trying to keep them at bay. But there were too many of them, and they were relentless. One of them lunged at me, its cold, bony hands wrapping around my neck. I struggled, but its grip was like iron. I could feel my vision fading, darkness closing in as the life was choked out of me. I woke up in the graveyard. The villagers were gone, but I was lying in a shallow grave, the dirt cold and damp beneath me. My flashlight was broken, the batteries long dead. The moon was high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the tombstones. I struggled to my feet, my body aching from whatever had happened in the church. I needed to get out of here, to find my car and leave this cursed village behind. As I made my way through the graveyard, I noticed something strange. The graves. They were all freshly dug. And the names on the tombstones, they were the names of the villagers. But there was something even more disturbing. One of the graves had my name on it. I stared in horror at the freshly dug plot, the tombstone bearing my name, my birth date, and today's date. I heard the whispers again, low and guttural, coming from the graves. The earth began to shift, the dirt rising as skeletal hands clawed their way out of the ground. The dead were rising, their hollow eyes locked onto me. I ran, stumbling over gravestones and roots, but the dead were faster. Their bony hands reached out, grabbing at my ankles, pulling me down into the dirt. I screamed, but no sound came out. The earth swallowed me whole, the cold dirt filling my mouth, my nose, my lungs. The village of doom is not a place you find on any map. It is not a place you stumble upon by accident, nor a place from which you can simply walk away. The village lives, breathes, and feeds on the lost and the curious, on those foolish enough to wander into its cursed streets after dark. I was one of them, just another nameless victim to fall into its clutches. Now, I wait in the darkness, among the villagers, my hollow eyes watching for the next lost soul who dares to enter. So beware and do not enter in this village ever. Because in the village of doom, once you enter, there is no escape. Only death awaits. Until then, sleep well if you can. Good night and sweet nightmares.